From battlefield to bomb shelter, from home front to hospital, from volunteer rosters to victims lists, women experience war in distinctive, gendered ways. These are their stories. These are their voices. Welcome to Voices of Women at Wartime, a podcast by the Center for Women's Justice in Israel. I am your host, Rivka Lubitch, and I am very excited to be talking today with Rabbi Liora Ezrachi-Vered on this episode. Rabbi Leora is a Reform rabbi and the Rabbi of Nigun Halev translated The Music of the Heart, a community which leads cultural events and social dialogue, fusing together Jewish tradition and contemporary Israeli culture. And we will be hearing about all the project and amazing activities of Nigun Halev. Hello, Rabbi Liora Ezrachi-Vered. I'm so glad you agreed to join us today on our podcast.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
I won't be able to start this conversation without saying a few words about our various connections. So first of all, I know your mother. She's a Reform Rabbi, Naama Kelman. And I know of your grandfather, Rabbi Wolf Kelman, a leading figure in the conservative movement years ago. I'm going to add here that my father, Charles Liebman, a professor of political science at Bar Ilan, was involved to some extent in the conservative movement, and they obviously knew each other. If I remember correctly, your mother wanted to stay within the conservative organization, but at that time they hadn't yet ordained women, and your grandfather himself may have been involved in trying to get women ordained, but that didn't happen yet, so she turned to the Reform movement, and that's
she
true.
turned to Rabbi Dick Hirsch, alav shalom, in the Reform movement, and he immediately said to her, "Can you start tomorrow?" And that was that, and she was the first woman ordained in Israel.
And your uncle, actually her brother, stayed within the conservative movement. So now the conservative movement lost your branch because then you
he was the rabbi, the founder of a Reform community in Israel. He was ordained by JTS, but his community was founded within the Reform community in Israel.
Okay, this is probably going to be like a little dot in history after Orthodox women also get ordained at some point. I mean, they have today, but not by the Rabbanut. But in like 50 or 100 years, it's going to be like...
All right, this will be the norm, and it'll be wonderful.
Completely, yeah.
A wonderful thing that happened to Judaism.
Yeah, it's taking a long time, but okay. So I want to hear about Nigun Halev, and what have you been doing since the massacre on October 7th?
So, indeed, I'm a Reform rabbi. I was ordained by the Reform movement. Nigun Halev is an unaffiliated independent community that was founded by third and fourth generations of the pioneers in the Jezreel Valley, of grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the first kibbutzim and moshavim. And I've been there for 7 years now as the rabbi. I think like everyone, it took us a few days to understand what was happening and to really find our footing, because on the one hand, we weren't immediately in any line of fire, not from the north and not from the south. And we were suddenly experiencing a lot of evacuees coming to our area, but our lives could pretty much within a few days could mostly continue in our daily routine, in the sense that our kids went back to school, the first, I think, among all the children in Israel, and we could move around freely. So what we really started to do was, first of all, just organize along with lots of other volunteers for emergency help to whoever needed it. So I think one of our interesting projects, besides, donating clothes and food and everything that was kind of streaming through us, was we joined the community of Kfar Yoshua, which is a small village in the Jezreel Valley, who within, I think, 24 hours or 48 hours was already receiving Thai workers from the Gaza envelope. So these were people who were working in the fields or were in their living quarters on the day of the attack, who don't speak Hebrew or Arabic or English, and some of them were killed and kidnapped as well, and severely traumatized, and had nowhere to go because they didn't have the sense of communities. A lot of the kibbutzim,
they didn't have the families, and they aren't part of the communities.
No families. The kibbutzim often are partnered with another kibbutz in the north. So like Nachal Oz immediately went to Mishmar HaEmek once they were evacuated. They have a long-standing relationship, and they weren't evacuated to hotels by the country.
I just want to add in here that the last episode that we did with Esther Marcus from Kibbutz Alumim, they had like 23 Thailand and Nepal workers that were murdered, and 2 were taken to Gaza, kidnapped. The Thailandis went with them to their hotel in Netanya, and they helped them out and everything. But anyway, these are other
Yeah, well,
Thailand.
unfortunately, not all communities
Right.
acted in that way, and they were all alone. And through a connection in Kfar Yoshua, there's a woman who's a Thai woman who's lived in Israel for, I think, 30 years, married to an Israeli man, and she kind of made the connection and said, just come here. And they opened their ulam sport, their basketball court. And then we kind of joined them as well. So people from Nigun Halev brought mattresses and brought food and brought equipment, and for the whole week or so that they were here, we helped them just to feel like they have a place to rest and heal. They even brought a Buddhist monk to lead prayers for them and give them some spiritual guidance. At one point, the Thai workers themselves cooked a meal for the army reservists who were being kind of called up in Kfar Yoshua, which was amazing. And then at the end, after they started going home, a lot of the women actually stayed in Israel and they cooked a meal to thank the volunteers.
Uh-huh. Oh,
And it was
that's very
truly
nice.
very heartwarming. So that was one project we did in the beginning, and that actually ended fairly quick because the Thai government sent them plane tickets and took them home. So that was one kind of thing. We just really felt that nobody was seeing, these people, and we had to do Ve'ahavta et Hager, and it was just the basic thing that we could do because everyone was volunteering in other places, and we felt that this was a place that we could
Right.
give
These
a
people are
little
like
extra.
falling between the chairs, as we say
Exactly.
in Hebrew.
Right. And that was one project that we did, and then eventually it ended. And another thing that we started doing, and actually is still going on, is we made connections with evacuees communities, and we started coming for kind of spiritual sustenance. We came for Kabbalot Shabbat we do it before our Kabbalat Shabbat. So either Friday morning or Friday afternoon. There was one Shabbat where I did three. I did two evacuee communities and then went to our community, drove back to lead Kabbalat Shabbat in Nigun Halev. So we mostly had a connection with two communities from the northern border, from Metula and from Bet Hillel.
Who were evacuated.
Yes,
You were coming into the communities that had left their homes and were in a
yes,
different place. Okay.
yes. They were evacuated pretty much in an organized fashion to hotels in Tveria and Tiberias. And in fact, most of them are still in these hotels with no real plans of when they're leaving. And we
They're
started
supposed
coming
to be
every
going back July or something, the 1st of July.
that's what they told me last time I was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we started coming for Kabbalot Shabbat once every 2 or 3 weeks, just giving them a space to breathe, to sing.
Something spiritual
Um,
in all the balagan that they're in.
yeah, and real connections were formed. So I did a Purim reading there, and we did Tu B'Shvat, and we've hosted the Metula community for a tour by one of our volunteers in the area, and we invite them to all of our programming. They're not that far now. So we've had a long-standing relationship with them ever since.
I'm not sure I understand exactly what Nigun Halev is. I want to just say that I used to be in Nigun Nashim years ago. I mean, I was actually one of the founders of it. There was a program called Nigun, which was religious, non-religious people that came together and studied in Midreshet Oranim. So Nigun Halev is what? The same type of people, but they're doing activities. I mean,
Yeah,
you don't all live in the same place. What kind
no,
of a
no.
community are you?
Nigun Halev is an interesting model. It's a community that was formed 24 years ago by a lot of the people who came out of the Midrasha and Oranim.
Right?
So it's a
Shai
lot of the same
Zarchi.
faces, Rabbi Shai Zarchi and Adas Ronzariz and Sarah Leshadmi, a lot of those wonderful people who had asked and wanted to have a space for themselves, not only to study Jewish texts in an intellectual fashion, but also to create a community where they can experiment with Jewish practice and Jewish spirituality. And this came after they also met Reform and conservative communities outside of Israel and also in Israel. And they felt that they wanted a space where they can sing and pray and have life cycle events and life cycle ceremonies like Bnei Mitzvah and weddings and so on. And it started as this kind of small group that joined with a Bet Midrash, with a study group from Nahalal that was already meeting. And they met once a month in Nahalal for Kabbalat Shabbat, just creating their own nusach. They're creating their own version of Kabbalat Shabbat. And it just started to grow. So from once a month, it went to once every 2 weeks. From once every 2 weeks, it came once a week. Then the first daughter had a bat mitzvah. They needed to create a bat mitzvah ceremony. Then the holidays arrived and they needed to create what they would do for the holidays. And it grew and grew and grew. And it's a very interesting and I think unique model where it's true that the community meets in one place. Now it's not in Nahalal anymore, but in a neighboring kibbutz because we outgrew the space in Nahalal. But people come from all over the Jezreel Valley, even from Haifa and Afula sometimes, but mostly from the little towns, kibbutzim, moshavim in the Jezreel Valley.
So I don't really understand because it's so-called open to all the different communities, but you can't be Orthodox and be in that community because then you can't do any of the things that are happening on Shabbat. And why do they have a rabbi? That I don't understand. If it's like not a religious group, then why is there a rabbi? Explain that one to me.
Okay. So I think it's fair to say that Nigun Halev was founded by secular people and for secular Israelis who want to have a connection to Judaism, but it's definitely opened up to non-halachic Jews in the sense that people who will drive on Shabbat and listen to music on Shabbat and will be egalitarian, but who want a Jewish community. And so now we have a wide range of, Chilonim, Reformim, Datlashim, all sorts of varieties and spices of the spectrum between, I would say, non-halachic to secular, if that's a way to put it. So people definitely have to drive to come and be in our services, but that's the people who are looking for it, and that's fine for them. Why a rabbi is an excellent question. Since the beginning, the community always had spiritual leadership. It's always been joint spiritual leadership, at least 2 or 3 people leading the community and coming from different backgrounds. The first rabbi was Rabbi Chen Tzfoni, who was also ordained by Hebrew Union College. She's since moved on to be the rabbi of a Reform community in Ra'anana. And they always felt that they needed at least one rabbi. So they've always had spiritual leadership and mixed. So there's Bini Talmi, who comes from a Shomer Tzair kibbutz. There's Shai Zarchi, who comes from Ganigar and the Midrasha and that kind of background. And then there's usually another rabbi who comes with a connection to the Reform movement, but that may change throughout the years as
But I would say for our listeners that are from outside of Israel and don't understand why they're not calling themselves Reform, it's probably most close to the Reconstructionist movement.
Yeah, it's its own thing. I don't think there's quite a parallel in the United States. Or maybe unaffiliated communities like Romemu or the lab, the kitchen, all those places. Maybe one of those. But it's a secular community in the sense that the people sociologically identify that way for the most part, but deeply want Jewish spirituality and a Jewish community. The community is very, very strong in Nigun Halev. People are highly committed. We have over 60, 70 volunteers who volunteer for hours in the community and give so much back. So
is there anything going on like this in any other place in Israel, or is this the only thing?
Well, there are other unaffiliated communities like Bet Tfilah Israeli and Zion maybe, but some of them have more connections to the movements. And I don't know of another community that has the model of being in one center while having people from all over come. I think that is a unique model. And there's smaller communities in the kibbutzim, in the moshavim. There are Reform and conservative rabbis who work in the rural areas of Israel in what we call the regional councils, but their model is slightly different than ours.
Okay, so let's go back to the
Yeah, so I was saying that one project that we did was working with evacuees, and we're continuing to do so even as the time goes by. One community from the south that was evacuated to our areas, in fact, has left. I think they've gone back. It's from kibbutz Gevim. So we were with them throughout the past 5 months, but the northern communities who were evacuated are still here and are still here for...
They don't know when it's going to start in the north.
Exactly. So we're kind of keeping that connection as much as we can and giving them whatever help and support we can. And it's very disheartening to go to these hotels and see them living there for months and months and months. Another thing that we've been doing, Nigun Halev has always set a priority to promote and create spaces for Jews and Arabs to meet. We live in the Galilee. The Galilee is almost 50% Jews and Arabs. We live in a very mixed area, even if the smaller communities aren't mixed, the area is. And we've always felt that it's extremely important to lead in this field and to create lots of opportunities for people in our community and people in our area to gather and meet. Not only has that not stopped since the war, I would say that we have doubled or maybe even tripled our efforts to meet Jews and Arabs together. So, first of all, in the first kind of few weeks after the war, we formed a group of rabbis, social workers, spiritual pastoral care leaders who tried to reach every funeral and shiva in the north. And there were other groups like these all around Israel, but I think what made us interesting is that we were the only group that had Arab women, Arab social workers and spiritual caregivers, because there were Arabs who were killed on October 7th and the subsequent weeks, and we wanted to support them as well. So I personally visited the family of Ahmed Daraushe, who was a paramedic who was killed in the Nova Festival while he was trying to save lives. And we visited other places. And we came together, Jewish and Arab spiritual care people, to visit these families. So that was, I think, something I'll never forget. For now, that group is kind of wound down a little bit. Thankfully, we don't have to visit as much, but it was something very, very special.
I'm going to ask a hard question. I mean, I'm all for everything that you're saying, but how many Arabs do you have that are involved in this?
In that particular group, we weren't a huge group, so there were 2 or 3 Arab women and then another 10.
And would they actually go to Jewish
They
shivas or
wanted
only
to so much. They wanted to, but they were worried that they might not.
be
Some of them are
welcomed?
women with a hijab. They were worried that they may not be welcome. So what they did is they would come with one of us or make sure that it's a family that it wouldn't bother them. But yes, they absolutely went to Jewish families as well, and we came to Arab families. In general, there was this kind of fear in the first few weeks that we might see a replay of May 2021. And not only did that not happen at all, there was nothing out of the ordinary in that sense. We saw a huge kind of surge of support from Israeli Arabs, from Palestinian Israelis, I guess you call them, who were horrified by what happened, who were outspoken, how this is against Islam, this is against
I actually
humanity.
didn't hear that enough. I mean, I have to admit that I was hoping that that's the case, but I didn't really hear it or see
They
it
did,
enough.
but one, it's, the media doesn't like to amplify those voices. They'd rather amplify voices who are trying to stir up trouble, I guess. And two, they were also terrified, and a lot of them were threatened by other people. I have a good friend who's a Sufi sheikh, and he wrote a very powerful statement, and he was harassed afterwards. What we've done since October 7th is one, we launched a new project called Titchadshi, which is a monthly meeting for women of Nigun Halev and women from the Bedouin town Manshit Zabda, which is in the Jezreel Valley Regional Council. Not only we never met before October 7th, this was a new project that we started. We've already met 3 times, including last week where we were invited to their homes to break fast with them after the day of fasting during Ramadan. So we had an iftar, and it actually coincided with for me, it was the meal
Tani
that
to
I ate
stare.
before Tani to still. Yeah. I ate it with them, and then I went into a fast. And then when I broke my fast the next day, I did it with 2 dates. The girls of the village made us a little package with 2 dates, which is the traditional food that you eat to break the fast in
Well,
Ramadan.
I have to tell you something. I'm volunteer at Rambam in the hospital with babies. So there are a lot of Arabs there, Muslims, I should say. So anyway, they had this bowl of dates. And I thought it was Antani Tester, and I thought it was because of the Jews fasting. I didn't realize. Then one day I walked by and I see, it was still there, and I'm thinking, why is it there? And they have the symbol of the Muslims. So I realized the dates are there not because it was Tani Tester, but because that's the way they break their fast. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. So it was very moving to break my fast with the dates that I received the day before at Manshit Zabda. So that's one project that we've launched. And the idea is that we meet once a month, and the highlight will be our Sukkot Shalom, which we do every year in Sukkot, including this year. 4 days before the 7th of October, we had 300 Jews and Arabs celebrating together in Sukkot. So that's one project that we launched. Another thing that we did is we gathered Jews and Arabs from the entire area to make care packages, which were also supplied with candies that we received from a Reform community in Baltimore. And after we wrote letters and made the packages together and wrote signs, we went to deliver these packages to Jews and Arabs who were evacuated from the northern border, from Kiryat Shmona, from Arbel Aramshe, which is the full Arab community that was evacuated from the northern
So
border.
that's the thing that I didn't actually realize, that there were Arab communities that were also
Yes.
evacuated.
Yes, they were evacuated to Nazareth mostly.
Uh-huh.
They're in this beautiful grand hotel in Nazareth. It's so bizarre. So you go to this beautiful grand hotel, and there are all these people in their like pajamas because this
Pathetic.
is where they're living now, and
Yeah.
kind of figuring out what to do. So we brought them lots of goodies, and that was so moving. Just to, first of all, to have the Jews and Arabs who live in the Jezreel Valley come together to make the packages and then to deliver them. So that was one project that we did. We've also hosted speakers in our community. We hosted the wonderful Zainab Abu Swaid, who's the first Bedouin woman to be elected to a local city council in Israel. Every year we do this in the kind of end of the winter. We gather local greens and cook traditional Arab recipes. So we didn't give up on it. We did it this year, and we did it with evacuees as well who joined us. Over Hanukkah, we went to Nazareth to light Hanukkah candles with the local Christian community, Arab Christian community that we have connections with. So I feel that not only have we not stopped building these bridges and connections, I think we feel it stronger than ever, and we see more of each other and we support each other. I get a lot of support and love from my Arab colleagues, Muslims and Christians that I work with.
My husband, Ronen Lubitsch, is involved in a lot of interfaith things, and I used to be involved when we lived in South Africa a little. But I think it's really much better when you do things than when you just get together and talk, because that's what they're doing all the time. You know, they get together or they're sent to Europe, to all kinds of places, and they come together, all these men, and they sit around and everyone says something amazing about their religion, and they all say that they want peace. But I guess the stuff that you do, you know, getting together, eating together, making packages together and doing that stuff, that's the real stuff.
Yeah, I also feel like, I mean, I love text studying, and I can sit and talk about God with my Christian and Muslim colleagues all day. Sometimes it's even more fun because I work with secular Israelis, so sometimes I need to hide that I'm a believer. But there's something about just doing something together and not just only talking about everything that's difficult that I think makes things a lot easier. You know, we have a project, we're going to cook together, we're going to package together, we're going to deliver it together. It allows us to connect in ways that.
Right. I once wanted to do a project of knitting together, but I never pulled it off. But it's so simple to do, just to get together women and sit around together. I never actually
I
did
do
it.
not know how to knit, so I'm not your person for that. But yeah, in general, anything that you do, I think is wonderful. And you know, we've done our fair share of also just listening and learning from different religions. I have a chevruta, Dr. Khaled Abu Ras, that we often teach together. We led a class now on Gilui HaKoran v'Matan Torah, the revelation of the Torah at Sinai and the revelation of the Quran to Muhammad. So it was really interesting, and I love doing that stuff as well. But I also feel that people need this kind of, you know, unfiltered, unstructured time to just get to know each other and talk to each other and do something with their hands. So I feel that that for me has been incredibly important. And when I talk to friends and colleagues from outside of Israel, so many of them, their interfaith relationships have been severed. You know, relationships that they've cultivated for years said, no, we have to choose. We can't be on your side, or we can only be on this side. And when I tell them that not only have our relationships not been severed, but have gotten stronger, they're shocked. They can't believe it.
Yeah. Well, this is really very special, and I wish the rest of the world would see this and learn from this and not feel that everyone in Israel is hating each other and such awful things that you see on the news.
Yeah, I think this is one of the strangest times I've ever lived through, and I don't know what will be. I think that's a big feeling that we're all feeling, is the unknown. What will our world be like? But I feel that, you know, in these kind of times, I kind of fall back on my core values. And my core values as a person, as a rabbi, as a woman, is to, create these connections, to believe that friendship and peace and security for everyone is possible, and to know that our tradition gives us spiritual sustenance and strength, and that community is what makes or breaks people in these kind of times.
Wow.
And in
Absolutely.
fact, Nigun Halev has gotten stronger. We've been statistically and constantly growing from week to week to week to week. People just keep coming more and more. It's really amazing.
Okay, so I want to remind again and say that I was in Nigun Nashim, and almost all the names that you mentioned are people that I studied with them. And so that's really interesting and fascinating to see where they've been going, because I remember when they used to
You're
talk about
definitely a
the
friend of our
Nahalal.
community.
A friend, okay. Thank you so much, Rabbi Liora. You really do amazing work, and I feel truly humble when hearing of all the great projects that you and the community of Nigun Halev have been coordinating. So much is needed to be done in Israel these days. I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in today. By listening to this podcast and giving women's voices your attention, you give them power. If you, like us, agree that women's perspectives are essential to the Israeli narrative, subscribe to the Voices of Women at Wartime wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a rating and encourage your friends to listen and subscribe too. If you have thoughts, questions, or comments, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on social media on the Center for Women's Justice's page, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. In addition, we appreciate any amount via our donation button that will help support our work. I'm Rivka Lubitch from the Center for Women's Justice. Be well and stay safe.